here.
Okay.
Rob, he retired?
Yeah.
Yes.
He retired.
He did.
So if you just heard the news, we're going to record this. John just turned on the record, and we have a full night, so I want to get started.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And I know that I don't have to do an introduction because from this little conversation, you know, people know Rob and Elisa, but I have to say just personally how awesome this is to have two people who I know lived in Montclair for many years, and we're in corporate and we're in education and lawyers and doing all sorts of development work, Jewish development work, working on camps. I mean, the kind of work that you guys have done. And then the next thing I know, you've written a farm to table cookbook.
Yeah.
And I think that if we weren't talking about food, I'd want to talk about transitions and careers and how new doors open, because I think that is another amazing topic. But that will be for another time. So without further ado,
oh boy.
let me turn this over to Rob and Elisa and talk about what you're doing now and where you are, and let's do it.
So bear with us a little second here, because we one of the things with Zoom, we have to get our technology in order here, and I will just give me a second for apologies for this, because I don't know what happened to our. Hold on 1 second.
You were doing so well.
I was doing really well. Hold on.
No problem.
There we go. Yep. Here.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay. We want to tell you about one time we did this, and half the time the screen was
nobody
blank.
could hear anything.
I know. Don't even ask. That's Zoom. Anyway, guys, we're really happy to be here. You know, of course, I'm Elisa, Rob. John, I want to thank you. Shirley, I want to thank you. Dale, I see you're on. I thought you were supposed to take the night off.
Come on, Dale.
So we're really happy to be here, and frankly, happy to talk about something besides politics for about 5 minutes, and happy to be back at Shomrei, of course. Of course, as you know, we're members. So our message tonight is universal. It goes beyond the geographic area of the book. We'll first speak about the Jewish aspect of the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, and then offer, and it's not a Jewish cookbook, don't get me wrong, and then offer 2 demos and show samples of food cooked from the recipes, including 2 novel ones for latkes, goat cheese latkes, which have been featured, frankly, around the world, including in the Jerusalem Post this past week, and then another one. And you can find these recipes on our website, berkshiresandbeyond.com.
And I'm going to pause you just for a minute.
Sure.
Since you've mentioned latkes, if you look in the chat, the book, a link to the book is available at Watchung Booksellers. Okay. It's a good Hanukkah present. And the other, so I'm just putting it out there because Hanukkah's coming. And the other thing, if you've got questions, throw them in the chat and we'll monitor them. Sorry for the interruption.
No, are you kidding? Anytime.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to share a brief 2-minute video, which is just a virtual tour of our book. And let's get this going here. And bear with it. Here we go.
In our new book, the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, you'll meet some of the remarkable farmers and chefs who play a heroic role in preserving the agricultural community of the area. That is, the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts and neighboring New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. We tell the stories of 42 of them with personal profiles, striking photographs, and 125 kitchen-tested recipes highlighting fresh ingredients, all inspired by or created by these farmers and chefs. The story this book tells, and the recipes, offer a picture of small family farms that go well beyond this region. This area is a special place, attracting visitors from across the country. It's known for its homegrown food and farm-to-table tradition, as well as its world-class scenery and culture. The mission of our book, the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, is to highlight the people, places, and things that make this region so special, and the stories of small family farms. The dedicated farmers and farm-to-table chefs we write about are committed to producing food that is tastier and healthier than what's often found in the supermarket by maintaining healthy soil and farming and producing food sustainably. And, as importantly, the meat farmers we interviewed are consistently concerned with treating their animals humanely.
It's tough to do this work. The farmers we interviewed are motivated to farm for environmental, social, political, health, lifestyle, and even spiritual reasons, often sacrificing a comfortable living for their values. Who could foresee when we began our journey 4 years ago to write the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook that its mission to inspire consumers to buy local would be more important than ever when it came out in May 2020. During this time and beyond, we need to support these hardworking and principled people. Our book, website, and Facebook page suggest ways you can buy their products even now. I'm Rob Bildner.
And I'm Elisa Spungen Bildner.
Our new cookbook, the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, sheds light on the farmers and the farms of the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. Thanks so much.
So thanks so much for listening. I'm just going to do a sort of quick check-in just to get a sense of where everybody is in terms of some of the themes that we're going to discuss today. And actually, I'm going to go to gallery view. Thanks, Rob. So that I can just raise your hand and I can see everybody. So I'm just curious. I know, nobody here is like running into grocery stores every 5 seconds, given what's going on. But when we could run into grocery stores every 5 seconds, if you have a choice, raise your hand if you specifically look for organic. I'm just curious, anybody here, organic shoppers? Fair number. Yeah. Fair number of organic, great. How about if food is labeled local, designated specifically local? Raise your hand if that's important to you. Again, looks like about half. And then last question I'm going to ask you, raise your hand if food that's labeled or in some way designated sustainable is something that you would seek out. Just raise your hand. A little bit less, but again, some interest. So I've always been an organic shopper. Said certified organic. And thank you for doing that. I was there, I was buying it, but I had many, many arguments with our son Rafi, who some of you might know, and I'm going to talk about more, who would argue with me that we should opt for local first, sustainable, preferably local and sustainable, and then organic last. And after doing this research for the book and after speaking to Rafi, I'm now at the point, and we'll speak about it over the course of the next, the next 45 minutes or whatever, at the point where if it's local and sustainable, that's my first choice. If I can't find local and sustainable, then I will look for certified organic. And you'll see why, and if there's any questions about these designations as I speak, feel free to ask me.
Yeah, okay. So of course, Shomrei's, we're part of the Shomrei family, so we know many of you for many years, but we've also been, besides Montclair residents for a long time, very full part-time residents of the Berkshires for 35 plus years. And Elisa and I are both trained as lawyers, but most of our professional careers have been in the food business. And as some of you know, I'm third generation. My grandparents founded King's supermarkets, and then I ran 2 food companies that I began that distributed fresh produce and specialty foods and helped farmers bring their products to market. And our youngest, Rafi, went to the Cordon Bleu, the cooking school, before he went to Yale. And he's now a master artisanal pizza maker under the brand Hilltown Hot Pies. And he was actually recently mentioned in the New York Times. And our older son, Ari, ran a craft brewery and consults in the wine business. So that they comprise the 4th generation. After we sold the companies in 2007, I studied photography. And Elisa is a former journalist and journalism professor, as well as an attorney, and also is a trained chef with a master's in nutrition. And she ran another one of our food companies.
So our cookbook's goal, of course, is to help readers create great food, but its other objective is to offer compelling reasons why you should buy and eat local wherever you are and how to do it, now more important than ever. The crux of this part of our talk today is to add, going beyond what we discussed in our cookbook, the Jewish imperative for buying local. Rob's going to put up a few slides as we speak. We were inspired, and I'll keep talking, but you can put up the slides. We were inspired to jump into this project when Rafi began gardening our Beckett, Massachusetts, which is where we are right now, backyard each summer. There's a picture of Rafi and me. He's at the Otis Farmers Market on a Saturday. Before he did farmers markets, he used to sell his produce in front of our house on a little cardboard table. And then in high school, he spent a semester at the mountain school in Vermont, which teaches high school juniors how to farm. And the following 2 summers, then Rafi transformed what was his childhood garden behind our house into October Mountain Farm, which is intensely cultivated, sustainable, and we'll get more into sustainability, half-acre of lettuce, tomatoes, and more exotic things like whatever. He's still assigned at farmers markets, and we would visit Rafi at these markets, and we'd see, his red Russian kale, his rhubarb, but we're really aware of the long hours and the grueling work it took for him to get those products to his customers. We were also aware of how little money he made, especially considering he didn't have to rent or buy land like pretty much every other farmer. On Friday, while we celebrated Shabbat, we're eating dinner, he invariably worked practically through the night to wash, bag, and process his produce to get it ready to sell at the all-important Saturday Farmers Market.
So at these markets, we met local farmers and were moved by stories of how they came to farm and their challenges, their commitment to the soil, the environment, to producing clean, healthy food that tastes good. As one farmer, Amelia Conklin of Skyview Farm in Sheffield, Massachusetts, told us, quote, "Anybody that's eaten a carrot that's fresh and local and grown organically or sustainably versus a carrot that's traveled 1,200 miles or more knows the taste is just so different. We thought a cookbook based on what the Berkshires grows and raises would offer one way to support local farmers here and elsewhere, often hidden from view, who likely do not intersect with our lives, but are people who bring us food they lovingly produce and most of the time at great financial sacrifice." So Elisa grabbed her MacBook Pro, I grabbed a digital recorder and my Nikon camera. And for many years, we traipsed down relatively untraveled dirt roads around the Berkshires to interview farmers in their fields as they harvested their watercress or fed their pigs.
So you may ask, what's Jewish about the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook? Yes, it's true that the Berkshires during the summer, like a normal summer, becomes a real Jewish neighborhood because camps are full and the area really teems with a lot of vacationing rabbis and Jews from New York and Boston who add to what's a really nice Jewish community that's here already. And yes, the area has a history of Jewish farmers. We interviewed 3 for our book, including one member of a couple who says that when she is weeding under a magnificent sky, which her husband calls his office, all of a sudden, she says, the Shabbat service runs through my head. But more importantly, we argue that the 42 local farmers and chefs that whose stories we tell operate their small family farms in ways that parallel Jewish precepts concerning agriculture and food, whether these people are Jewish or not. And we argue that supporting small family farms is quintessentially Jewish, and it's worth changing our food buying habits to seek out what these small family farms offer so that we can make sure our lives incorporate such Jewish values as Bal Tashchit, which means prohibiting waste or destroying resources, Tsa'ar Balei Chaim, not letting animals suffer, Oshek, not oppressing or exploiting workers, to name just some of the ones we'll mention today. We'll elaborate on these principles and then tell stories of the farmers so you can see how they exemplify them. But before we begin, I really suggest a book that was really central to my learning called The Sacred Table, Creating a Jewish Food Ethic, edited by Rabbi Mary Zemor.
So Elisa just mentioned Bal Tashchit, which literally means do not destroy, based in Deuteronomy, and constantly cited by Jewish environmentalists to illustrate the idea that we must treat our planet with care. Quote, "When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you may not cut them down. So even in war, we must treat the environment with respect. A Chabad commentary says, quote, if Jews must not cut down fruit trees in the extreme case of war when destruction is the norm, how much more so does this apply to normal life? Kohelet Rabbah says, quote, be mindful that you do not spoil and destroy my world, for if you spoil it, there's no one after you to repair it. Extrapolated to our talk, we argue that we should patronize farms that show care for the soil and environment. As a side note, Batsheva Appel in the Sacred Table argues that being a locavore is a Jewish value. In the Jerusalem Talmud, Rabbi Yossi says, quote, it is forbidden to live in a town that has no garden or greenery, which Appel suggests means you can't live in a place without a source of fresh produce. Buying local preserves this land from development and allows the small family farms on that greenery to make it. But beyond one particular town, the availability of locally grown food reduces our dependence on food that's shipped cross-country of the world at great energy costs, our norm in the US, adding to environmental destruction and violating Baal Tashchit. This norm also depends on large commercial farms growing only tough varieties that travel well, killing biodiversity. Our reliance on schlepping food cross-country reminds us of an admonition by one of the farmers we interviewed, and his name is Dominic Palumbo, whose story is worth briefly telling. And I'm going to just share a photo of his farm, which is called Moon in the Pond Farm. If you'll bear with me 1 second here. Here we go. And this is Dominic's farm, Moon in the Pond Farm. It's a beautiful spot in Sheffield, Massachusetts. Dominic Palumbo has had a hard road in his farming, like so many others. In 2016, he faced foreclosure, but he eventually raised money from donations, catalyzed by a fortuitous tweet from famed food journalist Michael Pollan. For Dominic, each time he sells at a farmer's market, through the incomparable taste of a just-picked cucumber, for example, he has the opportunity to help others understand the value, both personally and for the environment, of buying locally grown and clean food. This includes meat. Dominic has to say this about eating meat, raised locally, sustainably, naturally like his. Quote, red and meat and bad should not be inextricably linked. Red meat is great for you in balance. Carrots and vegetables are horrible for you if they are raised using bad chemicals and deficient soil. Environmentalist Dominic is convinced that small farms like Moon on the Pond will be the savior of this country's food system, enabling us to be resilient in the face of climate change and, frankly, the current pandemic. Quote, if most of our food comes from the Central Valley of California to Massachusetts, he warns us, you're going to be in trouble when that becomes either impossible to grow there or impossible to get it from there to here.
So I'd like to tell next the story of a farm, Hawk Dance, and focus on the way that this small family farm operates so that you can see, and you can see how they represent, frankly, small family farms everywhere, but how they adhere to the principle of Baal Tashchit. Again, they're not Jewish. You're going to put up the picture?
Yeah.
1 second, hold on 1 second. There's a picture of one of the farmers, Damon Clift. You'll notice he's what's called hand tilling. So he and his wife, Diane Creed, when we first visited them, had just finished a dinner of beet pancakes. And beets are just one of the 90 plants, talk about biodiversity, they grow on their 3-acre farm. Their dinner, by the way, inspired a recipe for beet and goat cheese latkes, which I mentioned before, and I'll show you at the end. And you should know that most of the 125 recipes in the book are inspired by what a farmer raises or grows or something he or she said to us. So Hillsdale, New York is where their farm is located, and it's about 120 miles from Queens, which is where they used to live. Damon was a house painter, Diane was a vet tech, and she owned a pet sitting business. And they were very moved by Back to the Landers, Scott and Helen Nearing, and also by Elliot Coleman, who's an organic and soil advocate. And they moved upstate to start Hawk Dance. The pair farm sustainably, and I know I've used that word now several times. They don't use chemicals, they don't use pesticides, they don't use herbicides. And sustainable farming often goes way beyond certified organic. And again, I go back to the questions I raised at the beginning. They, like some of the other farmers we interviewed, they farm by hand. They barely till their soil, or no-till or little-till farming allows the soil to retain carbon, organic matter, which is better for the soil and better for our atmosphere. Diane and Damon are adamant about living their ideals, about being in tune with the earth. They only use organic, non-GMO seeds. Diane says, we believe in supporting that kind of food because I don't want to be a genetic experiment, and I don't want my customers to be either. She goes on to say that everything we grow is done with such care and such love. We want people to feel that when they eat it, the joy we feel when we eat it, how delicious it is, and frankly, how hard it was to get the tomatoes to grow to that state. One of their customers wrote on Facebook, attesting to what Diane says, quote, let me know when you have more cherry tomatoes. Lucy and I ate ours in like an hour today. Again, as Rob mentioned, that like many farmers we interviewed, their story isn't an easy one. They made $3,000 in profit after years of farming. And like almost everyone we spoke to, one or both of the couple need to do off-farm work at some point in order to make it. But Diane gave us a one-word answer when we asked her if she's glad that they made the move from, Queens to Hillsdale. Absolutely, she said to us. We followed our dream. And even if we're not getting rich, at least we can say that we've done what we believed in, and we're continuing to do so.
The second Jewish value we mentioned is Sa'ar Balei Chaim, don't let animals suffer. God gives humans dominion over animals in Genesis, but it's tempered by many other Torah passages that demand we prevent their suffering. Sa'ar Balei Chaim is said to derive from Exodus. Quote, when you see the ass of your enemy lying under its burden and would refrain from raising it, you must nevertheless help raise it. Sa'ar Balei Chaim is even codified in the Ten Commandments. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle.
So let's spend a few moments on another set of farmers, and this is Skylar and Colby Gale of Climbing Tree Farm in New Lebanon, New York. And the Gales raise heritage pigs, and I know this is a Jewish audience, but Skylar and Colby are perhaps the most eloquent farmers we interviewed on treating animals with respect and in their own way. Again, they're not Jewish, following Sa'ar Balei Chaim. Let's bring a picture up in a second. Mm-hmm. So while Rob's finding the picture, hold on 1 second. Let's see, keep going. Okay, Skylar and Colby Gale. So we start our story of Climbing Tree in the book by saying that this is the tale of happy to be farming, but conscious ex-vegetarian pig farmers who raise animals instinctually using regenerative practices. It's a real mouthful. And in the book, we tell the whole backstory surrounding each word. But for purposes of this talk, I'll be briefer. Just know that Skylar and Colby searched for land for 6 years before they bought 20 acres in New Lebanon, New York with the help of the Land Conservancy, and then leased another 300 plus. As Skylar says, pigs need space. Quote, especially those allowed to express their natural instincts who freely roam the woods as their forebears did. What it means, she says, to raise pigs instinctually is to, quote, look at the world through a pig's eyes. Before the Gales started farming pigs, they raised sheep and then hens, but they really didn't like washing 450 eggs a day and finding hens running through their house when they escaped. And when they turned to raising heritage pigs, they found they were good at it. And they raised about 75 to 120 a year, but they did it with great ethical awareness. As Colby says, Guy, we're taking lives for our consumption, and that's not something to be taken lightly. And Skylar, who has a blog, notes that people always ask them how they feel about slaughtering. It's sad every time, she writes. These are living things, some of whom are extremely cute and or animals we have known since the moment they were born, and we choose to kill them. When killing animals we care about becomes nonchalant and fails to stir our emotions, then we will know we need to stop raising animals for meat. We respect our animals in life, and we are thankful for them in death. The Gales pigs live on grass, and they live in the woods year-round, and they graze on pasture that's covered with very healthy foraging crops that the Gales have planted themselves. But if you say to Skylar that her pigs are pasture-raised, she actually gets mad. We think that is good. What she and Colby are shooting for, she says, is, quote, regenerative agriculture, which is the new byword in agriculture. Pasture raised doesn't necessarily mean there's anything good to eat or that the land is staying healthy. Schuyler says regenerative means you leave the land healthier than when we started.
So we have time to briefly mention one more principle, OSHA, which forbids us from oppressing our workers. Leviticus commands us, quote, you shall not defraud your fellow, you shall not commit robbery, the wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. As Sean Stanton, a farmer in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, reminds us, workers in conventional large-scale slaughterhouses toil for low wages in unacceptable conditions. Just one example of worker oppression in commercial agriculture. Sean owns North Plain Farm and runs Blue Hill Farm for Dan Barber and his family of the famed Blue Hill restaurants. He told us about the difficulty of getting customers to pay the price for what grass-fed beef is worth. Sean says his animals eat costly certified or transitional organic feed, and slaughtering them is expensive. $400 for a pig at the small New England slaughterhouse he uses, compared to the $20 to $30 it costs large agricultural processors. But he says what consumers don't know about are the hidden costs behind the discrepancy. Large producers slaughter 10,000 pigs a day rather than the 20 or fewer at Sean's facility. Taking advantage, yes, of economy of scale, but those lower prices also result from what he argues is the inhumane way they structure the workday for those who do the killing. Quote, we talk about animal rights all the time. When you go to these places and see the kinds of jobs workers are doing for 8 to 10 hours a day, it's as much a human rights issue as an animal welfare issue. At Sean's slaughterhouse, people work a variety of jobs throughout the day. Quote, they might be killing in the morning, cutting in the afternoon. You're not on an assembly line when you're cutting one section of each pig that comes through and then moving it to the next person.
So you've heard some of these farmers' stories as brief as we've been, and I hope you understand why supporting them and small family farms in general, whether it's in the Berkshires or the wider New York City area, is important generally and for us as Jews, for the environment, the air, the soil, the land sent for development, for the humane treatment of animals, for respecting the lives of farm workers. And beyond these Jewish principles, frankly, the food tastes better and it's more nutritious because the food isn't being transported thousands of miles, losing nutrition. But back to the cookbook, and this is a cookbook. We frequently say it's 2 books. It's an accessible cookbook that you want to take with you to the farmer's market, and a journalistic treatise with stories and photos about small family farms. And although we've been less focused on the cookbook aspect until now, we're going to switch and we're going to end with 2 short demos. One, a video with our son Rafi, who we've talked about, that appeared on national TV, and that demos roasted zucchini and cherry tomato pizza. And then you'll see techniques on how to make home pizzas. And then I'll talk a little bit about a very quick super dessert that I make with cream from a local dairy. Just a few seconds before we begin on this, just to describe the philosophies that use our recipes. Our recipes are very accessible, or to quote Florence Fabricant of the New York Times, who featured our book, simple. What makes each dish delectable, and it's true of cooking in general, is if you use the best ingredients you can find. In this case, choose local, choose fresh, sustainable, you will have phenomenal food. And as I said before, each recipe highlights an ingredient grown or raised on a particular farm, which inspired the recipe. I don't use esoteric ingredients, but one of our messages is to go way beyond local carrots and kale, as great as they may be, and try the rutabaga, the kohlrabi, or whatever else that's in the produce bin that we all walk by practically every single time we're in a store. So let's go straight to the video.
Yeah, we're going to share a video of a demo, and here we go.
Elisa Spungen Bildner, and I'm the author with my husband Rob Bildner and in collaboration with Chef Brian Alberg of the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, which has 125 recipes inspired by the farms of the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts, New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. I'm here with my son Rafi Bildner, who's
Hello.
a master pizza chef, and who inspired us to write this book because of his foray into farming a number of years ago.
Yeah, so thanks, Mom. We're going
Sure,
to, it's an honor to be here with my mother and the author of this amazing, co-author of this amazing book. We're going to show a simple pizza recipe from the book that uses the bounty of the summer growing season here in New England. We just picked up the zucchini from Woven Roots Farm from our CSA, a farm featured in their book. We have these beautiful local cherry tomatoes, some red onions, some local basil, dairy. This is a unbelievably rich agricultural area, and a pizza is a perfect canvas for that that beautiful farm bounty. So I'm going to just, it's a simple zucchini and cherry tomato pizza. I'm going to throw some cherry tomatoes, some sliced red onion, some zucchini, a little olive oil in a bowl here just to mix up, a little salt, some ground black pepper, and pizzas are simple. Don't go crazy here. We want to literally just let the ingredients each sing for themselves on the pizza, so we don't need to have an overly complicated pizza. And I think your recipe in this book really just does that.
Super simple.
Super simple, and we're going to use a dough that I made. I do a sourdough crust. You can go to your local pizzeria to get dough if you're not comfortable making it at home. We have an easy recipe in the book, but I stretch this in a lot of flour here. We want to make sure that pizza is sliding around a lot. That's where people get into trouble making pizzas at home. And I'm going to top this with these ingredients that we just tossed in the bowl, some local ricotta, mozzarella from a farm just to the north of us here, we want every ingredient going onto the pizza now to be perfectly spiced and ready to go. We don't want to be layering so many different complicated ingredients. We want to keep this really simple. So I'm going to switch spots with you, Mom.
Sure.
One home pizza making tip I'll give is we want to let gravity do the work when we're stretching that out. As you said, as you saw, I just let the dough fall nicely and stretch itself. And I'm going to get this in the oven with a little ricotta, mozzarella, as I said. Throw these ingredients on and just put them all over the pizza. This beautiful local zucchini, the cherry tomatoes, and local mozzarella, and pop it in the oven. And Mom, while I'm having it in the oven, you want to talk a little bit more about why you wrote the book?
Sure. So we wrote the book because we wanted to show that you can have the most extraordinary food if you use really fresh, preferably from local sustainable farms, which is what our book, our recipes are inspired by. I'm just going to hold up just so you can see. This is another recipe from our book.
Yeah, I can hold it up
You
closer.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Gorgeous.
This is a chilled melon and mint soup. It takes maybe 15 minutes to make, 20 minutes to make.
I'll say with some local wildflowers, edible wildflowers on the rim here.
And again, our idea was to create or have accessible recipes that, again, they shine because of the ingredients, using when you can, fresh and local. And also, in doing this book, we wanted to tell the story of the farms that inspired the recipes, but the farmers that we met in our journey around this area, learning what this area produces, and wanted to show you how hard they work, how extraordinary things they do to preserve the environment, and at the same time giving us the most incredible bounty, beautiful food.
And the recipes are very easy. I mean,
for the most part, there's maybe one or two that are a little harder.
Yeah, a pizza is one of the more complicated ones, but again, you can buy dough from a local pizzeria if you don't want to make dough at home. And what I'm doing now is, obviously we have this gorgeous wood-fired oven behind us, but you could obviously use a pizza stone at your home oven. You could use a baking sheet if you don't have a pizza stone. And I'm just turning this pizza a little bit just to give it even coloration on all sides. This is cooking much quicker than it would in your home oven because it's at 800 degrees and it's a wood-fired oven. And it's just about out. But I want to encourage you to think of making a pizza, as you'll see when this comes out. We're not flattening the dough. We're not rolling the dough. We're just moving the air around from the side, from the middle of the crust to the outside. And that's how you get these gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful crusts that are really airy. And the cornicione, the crown of the pizza, as we call it, is beautiful. So we're going to dig into this.
Absolutely.
And any final words, Mom, that you want to say about?
I'm going to just suggest that if you want to find out more about the cookbook and more about how you can produce these extraordinary recipes and about farmers' lives, check our website, berkshiresandbeyond.com. We hope to see you there.
And we will cut this up and enjoy a beautiful bite of this cherry tomato and zucchini pizza inspired by the local farms in this agriculturally rich region.
Right.
So
this is, I should say, inspired by Berkshire Bounty Farm, one of the most beautiful farms in the area. Very small, prolific.
awesome. Take care.
Okay, so
So guys, I'm moving to a different camera. So Robert, do you have it on me?
Now we're going to go into our.
Okay.
We're going to go.
Well, Robert's switching cameras.
The food demo department here. Bear with me a second. And there we are.
One of the things I'm just going to add, that was a recipe about summer ingredients, but the truth of the matter is you can make pizzas, just sub in some of the fall varieties and you'll have a great pizza. You don't have to use summer. Again, one of our principles, you can always find something to sub in or out. So I'm going to just show you very, very quickly a recipe called chocolate ganache. Can you see it? There we go. Look at the camera. So this is super simple again. And what makes this recipe, I think, really good is that I use, and I would hope you use it, if you can find it, local dairy. I'm using a heavy cream. It's going out. Heavy cream from a local farm. Just a few comments about the recipe. So I start with a cup of local cream, heavy cream, same as heavy whipping cream, not the same as light cream or light whipping cream or whipping cream. Very, very different. I mix 1 cup with a teaspoon of, I use organic vanilla. You can also find local vanillas too. Boil them. When they're boiled, I bring them over to a bowl in which I put chocolate chips. Let me tell you about chocolate chips. Here's a very nice brand, Guittard, very nice brand. But frankly, I like to make this a sugarless dessert, much better for you. And so I use Lily's dark chocolate baking chips, which have stevia in them. So this is a totally sugarless dish. I'm also going to mention, because I need, I think, 15 ounces of chocolate chips, indispensable to me in cooking. I'd say it's one of 2 of my favorite things in the kitchen is to have a kitchen scale. And the one I'm showing you happens to be one I got from King Arthur's. It's very sturdy, it can hold a lot of stuff. I much prefer to cook by weight if I can. So it's really exact. And I say this, and at the same time, I say you can play with recipes. I know there's a little whatever. So I take the boiled cream, pour it over the chocolate chips, which are in a bowl. It melts the chocolate chips pretty quickly. Add 2 tablespoons of butter. And then I also add, which you can do or not do, organic dried wild blueberries, which is what this is. The recipe calls for dried cranberries. I frankly found that I like wild blueberries better, so I've changed it around, gives it a very interesting texture. And when it's all melted, you have to work really quickly because ganache, which is basically chocolate and cream, will start hardening right away. So I prepared a pan, and the pan I prepared, actually I put parchment paper, I cut it out to the shape of the pan. So when I pour the melted chocolate in, it's sitting on the parchment. So when it's finished, which means after sitting in the refrigerator, there's no cooking for about an hour or so, at least an hour, I can very easily pull it out, cut it up. I've got a clean pot, clean pan, and it's done. I just want to mention one other thing when I talked about cream that I think is really important. One of the things that's also distinguishing is I use I use pasteurized cream and not ultra pasteurized. You'll find the ultra pasteurized cream is your normal commercial cream. It'll last forever. But it's got a different consistency than pasteurized, which is often what more local farms will produce. It doesn't last as long, but it's a much better consistency, much richer consistency. So if you can find pasteurized, it's better. And local, it's great. So let me just move over to show you some dishes.
The finished product.
I did, Rob. I did. I showed the ganache. Yeah, I showed it here. There's a little, always hard to see on Zoom. Yeah. Zoom is not the best way to highlight food, but we try. We all need to sort of change our operating procedures. Okay, so
Lisa, who's coming to dessert tonight?
You are.
I love to.
Shirley, we're waiting for you.
So while we're on the subject of dessert, Shirley, so here's an apple bread, which I have a whole bunch of yeast breads in this, non-yeast breads in this book, quick breads they're called. I happen to have bags of apples that we picked over the last couple of weekends in the refrigerator, and I'm constantly making apple bread. And I meant to bring out the applesauce and forgot, but okay, applesauce, apple pie, freezing them. My freezer is packed with apple things. It's delicious apple bread. Here's another dessert. And again, secret to that is I'm using apples that we just picked, really fresh apples. Kind of thing I probably would be less likely to make, in the summer before apples really start. This happens to be simple brownies, but I add a lot of orange to them, so they have a nice taste to them. Again, this is using local dairy, and it's inspired by a farm called Hawthorne Valley Farm. around us, which has a summer camp for kids to learn about farming. It's a biodynamic farm, which means it goes way beyond organic, sustainable. It's concerned with every aspect of the farm being what they would call perfect, including workers' lives. So that's
so the name of that recipe is?
Oh, I've called camp farm camp brownies. Okay, we're through with dessert. Let's go to, we mentioned latkes, so let's talk about, before we get to latkes, let's talk about another first course. Hold on 1 second. So I don't know if you could see this. This is roasted tomato and garlic soup. I made these actually with the last of our tomatoes and froze it. You can still find, again, people always ask us, how do you shop for local at other times of the year? One of the ways I do it with tomatoes is I will buy, not hothouse tomatoes, but I'll buy hydroponic tomatoes, which are local. They're grown in sort of a water bath. What's the name of your friend's farm? Aero Farms? Is Hero Tomatoes? Farms, in Newark? Newark has a bunch of they're called urban farms. Yeah. Anyway, great recipe. Again, find the best tomatoes you can. Find whatever seems to be local or not transported or hanging out for months. Let's talk last about latkes, and I'm sorry to bring the applesauce, but it looks like applesauce, but it's really delicious when it's homemade. So these are the beef goat cheese latkes I mentioned to you. There's a stack of them using a local goat cheese, local beets, and here are rutabaga latkes made with rutabaga, local rutabaga, potatoes, etc. Both are 2 varieties of latkes. Recommend them highly. Okay.
So thanks so much for listening. We're really enjoyed speaking with our Shomrei family. We apologize, we went on maybe a little longer than normal, but we have some time for questions, of course, and Shirley, take it away.
I have the first question for you, and this actually comes from one of Shomrei's cooks or chefs. Sure. He does a lot of cooking for us. And
sure.
he says, what's your favorite thing? This is from John, he says, what's your other favorite thing in the kitchen next to the scale? He wants to know what to go buy.
Okay, it's a really good question. I will be honest with you, and it's expensive, but I will tell you, it displaces a million other pieces of equipment, and that's a Vitamix. The Vitamix is a high-speed, super powerful blender. I think Breville has one. There's other varieties of it. And again, it's the kind of thing, I didn't get it until I think maybe just a couple of years ago. It has changed my life. I don't need a blender. Frankly, don't need a food processor most of the time. I use it for everything.
Yeah, and then we use it. One of our favorite summer recipes in the book is chilled melon soup, and which we showed in the video with broccoli, cantaloupe, and honeydew. And anyway, that's the Vitamix is used to make.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
and very fast.
A scale very cheap. You've got to always get a scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scale and that Vitamix.
A high-speed, powerful blender.
Yeah, I will add, I'm a big Instapot fan, but maybe that's for another.
That's another talk.
I don't need Instapot. It's okay.
All right.
Jerry Bloom is worried that he put on 3 pounds just watching you.
I will after this talk. I'm very hungry myself.
we just eat up everything that we make for every demo, so it's really a problem.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how, I understand why you did this. I understand, the influence of Rafi, but Rob, you weren't a photographer in the old days.
Right.
Elisa, you were a journalist, but you guys weren't doing this kind of writing. How did this transition take place? Yeah. And how did it feel working together?
Okay, as usual, the HR side. Great question. We often think about that question, like, why did we do this?
Why did we do this?
Yeah, so I think it just this project came together as a way to combine various passions we have. Look, let's begin with food. Food really is in our DNA. We really care about, how food's produced, what it tastes like, how it's prepared, about the industry and all that. And that comes from the background that we both have, as we mentioned. So there's that. Photography is something that came more recently to me when I sold our businesses in 2007. I've always been a photographer. I mean, I've always done the family photography, I always enjoyed it, but I never studied it. So the time I had at that point gave me an opportunity to actually study it formally. So I went to photographic workshops, frankly, all over the US, some around the world. I worked with some really outstanding teachers, including one in the Berkshires by the name of Steve Donaldson, and also one at Yale, Mike Morrison. So that was, and it just seemed that between the food and the photography, we're looking at a way to combine our interests. And then I guess, Elisa, you speak about, journalism and cooking and culinary.
So after we sold our companies, we each had our own bucket lists. And I will be honest with you, my bucket list really, I started on it pretty seriously. Number one was to get a chef's training. Very honestly, after I had a really bad bicycle accident, and it just sort of put everything into perspective, because I was just really lucky that I emerged from it relatively unscathed, and decided it's time to do things that I really put off.
Wow.
So I ended up going to chef school. I had a lot of broken bones, but I went to chef school. It was fine. I was able to do that. And I've always been involved in journalism, and always loved writing about foods, and then ended up getting a master's in nutrition. So I just put them all together to do this. The one thing I will say to you, and I don't say this often to audiences, but many of you would probably know this. When we first started writing this book, we thought it was going to be a vegetarian book. I'm vegan. Rob is pescatarian, sort of more vegetarian. Yeah. And as we went interviewing the farmers, we found that, guess what? There's a lot of meat farmers in this area, and it would not do justice to the area if we did not include meat recipes. So we do. The book is definitely not a vegetarian book. I offer a lot of alternatives if you want to use meat, not use meat, whatever. But I mention that because that really sort of set us on this particular path with this particular book.
And to just answer the rest of your question, which I think is a great question. All these different interests kind of came together, Shirley. And as we mentioned, as we became really inspired by these farmers, and again, I was in the food business for 20 plus years. I had met farmers all over the world, but I really was taken with the farmers we met here, who was just so committed and really sacrificing so much to do this. And I don't know, it was just one of these epiphanies one day as we were at a farmer's market, and we began to get to know some of the farmers. And we said, you know what, I would love to do a photographic, project about the local farmers. And Elisa said, wow, let's do, find a way to create some recipes. And I don't know, it just came together. We had this epiphany, said, let's do this cookbook. It was truthfully, we say it's 4 years ago. It really is 7. We don't want to tell people how long. It was 7 years ago. And, life gets in the way. We started it. And then as some of you know, we lost our parents relatively suddenly over a period of just a few years, period of really, 3 years, pretty much. Yeah. And so when we were struggling, coping with those challenges, we pretty much stopped for a while. Then we picked it up again. But we got into full gear, I'd say 2019. And actually then, we felt we had done something. We had uncovered some stories that were interesting. We had a collaborating chef who helped us with recipes. And we wrote the book proposal and got the interest from, and then eventually from Countryman, which is W.W. Norton, which is actually a very good publisher that, picked us up. So that's how, working together.
You've been doing it for a long time.
We worked together. It's been
running companies.
We did the Foundation for Jewish Camp together. Not always easy, but we enjoy working together.
And Dale answered your question. I have no clue.
So Dale's last question, but I have another observation for you. Dale's last question said, "What's your next joint project?"
Yeah.
And she's talking. So what Dale is writing, and this sort of takes it, she said, is there a way to make local sustainable produce more affordable for people on tight budgets?
Yeah.
And I guess, Mike, when I grew up in the 50s. Okay, I know I don't look like that, but I grew up in the 50s, and then
right, I did too.
We only ate fruit and vegetables that was seasonal. right? Because there were greengrocers, there was really not much of a supermarket in the Bronx. And so there was fruit stand, and you had what was seasonal. And it was very hard for me to get used to seeing certain things off season. I still can't buy it because it just feels wrong. So much of what we get now is shipped, grown somewhere else, far away. That's expensive, right? And so to Dale's point, how do you make it affordable?
Okay, so we've got two different answers. Several things I wanted to say. One of the issues is when people go to farmers markets and they see a tomato and it's X dollars, and they say, and this is actually part of the reason we got started on this, and they'd say, oh God, I'm not going to spend this much on a tomato. What they don't realize is that's not an inflated cost. That's what it really costs for that farmer to produce that tomato, and they barely are making a profit. Our whole viewpoint is skewed, and Rob, you may want to talk a little bit more. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
A little more about this.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I was going to say. The other thing I'm going to say, and then Rob will talk a little bit more about the social justice issues because it's more extensive than that. One of the other issues I was going to mention is that this is apropos what you said, Shirley, about eating food in season. So farmers now have worked it out, even small family farm, because they've had to, so that they can grow almost 3/4 of a year. Even, in Massachusetts, where we had snow on the ground, 6 inches last week,
right?
They've used what are called low tunnels, high tunnels, greenhouses, whatever. So you can get local food a lot longer than you think, without having to resort to getting it from, South America, whatever.
Yeah. Right? So yeah, and I'll just add on the issue of cost, Shirley. Actually, the food we get in the supermarket, conventional food, is relatively cheap. That's the issue. It's not that locally grown food is expensive. It's that the food we typically find in a supermarket or fast food is cheap. Why is it cheap? There are enormous subsidies for large commercial agriculture, whether it's the irrigation in California or all these. I mean, we've heard about them with all the subsidies for the farmers in the Midwest, that Trump was throwing them when we had the issues with China. So large agribusiness gets a lot of help that enables them. And as we said, also exploitation of workers. I mean, there's all, we've read about
farmers the environment, we can go on and on.
So it's actually, the food we eat is artificially cheap. So that's one point. Social justice is a big issue, or as we say, food injustice. And Dale and we have actually been talking about it with respect to Montclair. The answer there is we do find ways, and ways are being found to make locally grown food more accessible. For example, Hawthorne Valley Farm, we mentioned that farm, the one that inspired the brownies. They actually have a market in Hudson, New York, in a lower income area that offers locally grown food to consumers at a cost they can afford. It's subsidized, but it's part of their mission. As we said, they're a sustainable farm. They care about the community. A lot of communities now are making it possible to have farmers markets spread out more not just in, let's say, the touristy areas, but areas where folks live. So, I mean, this is a big topic. Would love to talk about it. We can do it offline as well, but we're all aware of it. The farmers are and frankly, most of the farmers we interviewed are finding ways to make their food accessible to folks who can't afford it through donations to the food banks, food pantries, and so forth.
So this is a political issue, and the politics of it are that big ag gets money, big ag ruins the environment, big ag does terrible things to workers. You could go on and on. Animals, whereas small family farms get practically zip. They get something sometimes from states. Yeah. They do it on their own, and they do it right. So it's a choice we.
Our message is simple.
And John, you had a question that flashed by. What was the question?
So you had two other questions. Jerry wanted to know, and we're going to run over, so bear with us. But
not going anywhere.
Jerry wanted to know about, the impact of the coronavirus on all of this, and you talked about that a little bit in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And John, in similar fashion, is how do the small farms survive? Is it about restaurants? Is it local restaurants? So this whole, so are restaurants key to survival? Has Corona shut that down?
And then maybe you can finish with it. Yeah. So interestingly, many of the farms that were not totally dependent on restaurants, which some of them are actually doing very well, right? Because supermarkets have been, just booming. A lot of the farms have created new farm stores. Their CSAs, which we didn't really talk about, but you know what CSAs are, right? You know, you buy a share of the farm, community supporting agriculture. They doubled the number of their CSAs. They literally cannot produce or sell more food. They're at their capacity. So many of our farms are actually doing better than ever. That said, farms dependent on the restaurants have been hurting. And so, you know, what's going on is really a mixed bag. We do have a lot of takeout among the restaurants, but, you know, the restaurants, as we know, are really hurting right now. You want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I'll just go briefly. So on the issue of the restaurants, I really worry, whether you're in Massachusetts or Montclair or New York City, we worry a lot about them because every restaurant, because we interviewed restaurateurs as well, and their stories are in the book too. And a local restaurant that we're very close to the owner, I think she was mentioned, but whatever, Rachel Portman. Rachel was telling us that they basically decided to stop. They were like on a long time hiatus, and they had a booming takeout business. And they just said, she said, we just can't make it. So any farmer that's dependent on selling to Rachel is a problem. Other point I want to make, and I don't mean this as a non sequitur, but I think it's important to know the big issue with farmers surviving, small family farms, is that they have a method of distribution, that they're able to get their products to market. So the restaurants are a problem if they can't get them to restaurants. So the question is, how do they get them, you know, to grocery stores, whatever? That's tough for small family farms. And there happens to be a local distributor here who's picked up a lot of these small family farms, which is really essential. But distribution is really the key. Yeah. And I'm just going to mention two websites because it also helps if you can go to the farms. And again, you don't have to go to the Berkshires, although I should mention that the Berkshires are considered local to New Jersey. I mean, this would be considered eating pretty local. Right. I won't go into the whole definition of that, but so one of them is farmstanding.com and localharvest.org.
Yeah.
Both of them will tell you about farms
and I'll just conclude by saying, visit our website, berkshiresandbeyond.com. We have a lot of information. We have very active social media. We've kept up. That's what it takes to sell a book in a pandemic. So our Instagram, and we're telling the stories of what these farmers are doing now. So I know it's time, and we love talking with you all, and happy to continue at any other time. And thanks.
This has been great. This has just been wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, and it's really interesting. You start with this with a farm to table cookbook, and look at where we've gone with it. There's so much, and thank you for giving it the depth and the richness that you did.
Thank you all. And I'm really good to say I had everybody, because some people came on a little later, so really good to see everybody.
Nice to see you, friends.
So before we say goodbye, I want to just remind everyone, our next speaker is again somebody from Shomrei, and it's Kim Marcus. I mean, they actually moved to New York, but we still love them. And Kim is a professor at NYU, and what she's teaching is something she introduced at one of our Nourishes a couple of years ago, her research on segregation in the suburbs and what that looks like and how that was created. And that has become core to one of her classes, and she's published her book. And she's up in the Berkshires somewhere writing, actually, and teaching from the Berkshires. So that's the 24th of November. And so we move from sustainable farming to how we live with each other. And I invite you all to come back to that, and come back. See us then, Rob and Elisa. It'd be great to see you.
Great to see everybody. Stay healthy.
Nice to see you. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.